ladies and gentlemen, my name is Emily Sophia and I'm going to be breaking down for you lovely people the latest Spike Jonze masterpiece, Her. So, quick items of business before I dive into this review, and just so you know, it's going to be in two parts. Part numero uno, I am basically going to give you spoiler-free analysis of my emotional reactions to the film, basic premise, kind of what you can expect going into it without revealing the full extent of the plot. And then after that, I'll dive into part dos, if I can count on my fingers. I'll be going in full depth about the characters, about the way that the plot proceeds, all of that jazz. It's definitely a film that warrants full discussion, whether you've seen it or not. And it's a film that I've been following the updates for a very long time. So suffice it to say, I was absolutely exhilarated when it completely and utterly met all my expectations, while at the same time overthrowing everything I thought was going to happen in the movie. At every turn I thought, oh, I could see this situation being a conflict, oh, I could see this situation being a conflict, and the film was like, it is not so. And it does it in a really beautiful, fantastic way that just keeps your heart pounding at every angle. So, let's dive into this madness together. First part, no spoilers, so if you've seen it or not, let's go ahead and hash out the basic idea here. So, like I said, it was directed and written by Spike Jonze, who actually cameos as a voice in the movie, as the voice of an alien child in a video game that the main character plays. So for those of you who saw it and didn't know that, I had to crack up at that because that was a pretty fantastic character. I have to say, he just really tied the narrative in. But yeah, so Spike Jonze is, you know, so the brainchild of this project. And then we have Joaquin Phoenix as Theodore. He's the main character in the film. Basically, this lonely, melancholic writer who's recently gone through a divorce. He's struggling to be intimate with himself, with the world, pretty much at every angle. He is barring himself off from joy, as it were. And then we have his best friend is Amy, played by Amy Adams. So, you know, there's their characters kind of come together in that sense. A very charming and just a force of light in Theodore's life as well. Rooney Mara plays Catherine, who is the ex-wife of Theodore, Joaquin's character. And Chris Pratt is Paul, Theodore's co-worker, whom I freaking adore the crap out of. All you park and recreation people, parks and recreation. I've seen the freaking show. Is there an S or is there not an S? I couldn't tell you. Too much caffeine, my brain it's on the decline now. But anyways, who else? Olivia Wilde is in the mix, and then, of course, we cannot freaking forget the beautiful, astonishing Scarlett Johansson, who plays the voice of Samantha, who is a computer operating system, which Theodore picks up, and the whole story is set in this not too distant future. You know, the year is never specified, the location is never, well, maybe it's specified, and I just didn't freaking notice because my heart was too wrapped up in, you know, the emotional part of the plot. Oh well. So basically, what I love about this movie is it's set in a future that at the same time feels very much like our own age, or something that's really not too far away, so it's within our grasp. We can kind of understand the concepts here. We can see there's a certain aesthetic, you know, the colors, the styles. Apparently high-waisted pants are gonna be real big in this future, okay? And yeah, so set in the future, Theodore, he's writing, he's working, he's doing what he can to get by. And then he finds out about the world's very first hyper-intelligent computer operating system. So, you know, he bites, he takes it home to his computer, fires it up. The program asks him a few questions about himself, only 3, and they really seem quite random, so it's fascinating that they kind of construct this personalized OS from these 3 tiny questions, which I won't spoil for you if you haven't seen the film. And then we have Samantha, who apparently has named herself, and she comes equipped with a very tangible personality that's just conveyed through her voice. And we all know, for those of us who are Johansson fans, you know exactly what to expect from her in terms of her voice and her inflections and what she has the power to convey. It comes through so wonderfully in this film. They really couldn't have picked a better voice for the role of Samantha. But at any rate, so Theodore is kind of shell-shocked by just how disarming his new computer operating system is. She makes jokes, she asks questions, she wants to know about the world, and yet at the same time knows so much, and her knowledge is growing every day. And it proceeds into this whole crazy emotional thrill ride, which, you know, I won't say too much more until the second half of the video, but this film is a must-see on all levels. Visually, it is stunning. The cinematography is not without purpose. I can freaking tell you that much. And just the way that the narrative plays out, we are allowed to really sympathize with Theodore, and even to come to sympathize with Samantha, who is essentially faceless, but she becomes as real to us as she becomes to Theodore, and so on and so forth. So it's brilliant to look at, to experience. The narrative just flows so stunningly. And we also, the environment is engaging, the situations, you know, range from tragic to absolutely comical. And the different people in Theodore's life make for such an interesting, fun, eclectic little story, while at the same time being very focused and very driven, and ultimately that really enables the conclusion to rock you, and in a good way. You know, what I expected from this film was for it to end in some kind of terrible, horrific tragedy, because that's just kind of what I braced myself for. I know that TV and movies, if they're good, they're out to hurt you. You're gonna be weeping by the end. There will be a few forests cut down just to supply the Kleenexes necessary to hold back your sinuses from flooding the world, okay? You know, that's just how it goes. And at the same time, so it's either one end of the spectrum or the other. It's either gonna be really tragic or really cheesy. And so that was kind of what I was expecting from the film as far as where it was going to end up. And yet what everything ultimately built up to was incredibly, perfectly bittersweet. I felt a sense of joy and enlightenment by the end of the film, while at the same time, you know, there was a little bit of Niagara Falls starting to happen in my eyes. You know, no real tourist flow yet, but it was getting there. It was pretty intense. But at the same time, I just felt such a sense of peace, and I came to terms with the way that everything ended, just as the characters present at the end do. I'm trying so hard to be able to give you my impressions without saying too much more, but as a person who's kind of become a Scrooge about Hollywood romance films, as a person who is freaking sick and tired of the way these types of things play out, this film was an absolute refreshment, and the messages that it conveys are really what I needed to hear on a freaking soul level. I was just, you know, it was all right there. I was feeling it big time. And what the major message of the film for me was the idea of intimacy. You know, what constitutes intimacy? Is it a physical exchange between two people? Is it an attraction? Is it communication? And what we see is just how complex intimacy is, and how intimacy is ultimately contingent on the people who are being intimate with one another accepting and loving themselves before they're able to love others. So it has an extremely uplifting message. And while as the film becomes more complex and the sort of fear of the unknown builds throughout the story, we're not lost in this crazy wave of philosophy or technology, you know, things that the film could easily overplay. Rather, you know, we're kept really tight in its pocket. We feel the story at every angle. It is constantly brought back to emotions and struggles that we are familiar with. So even though it's set in this future world where the possibilities seem limitless and it's kind of crazy to try and wrap your head around, you feel everything and you can understand it even though you don't, you know? If that makes any kind of sense. I hope it does. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and dive into the spoilery territory because, you know, I like to break down some specific moments that I found really impactful. But the film, it has a beautiful message. It breaks all cliches. It overthrows your expectations, which are probably crappy ones. Let's be real. And it instead, you know, it dodges the tried and true of the Hollywood romance formulas, and it forges its own path, and it says something really beautiful about society, and it just speaks to everyone from every walk of life. You know, whether you're attached to your technology or not, has nothing to do with that. It's about owning your feelings, loving who you are, and allowing that to strengthen you to love other people. That's kind of how I sum it up. So without further ado, let's get into the spoilery territory for those of you who saw it and want to break some stuff down. So, you know, again, I adore all the characters. I don't think that there was a single face in the game that I didn't cherish at some point or another. You know, Theodore, he's got this quirkiness about him, and there are other people who kind of register that quirkiness, but at the same time, he's really accepted in his corner of society. The only person, you know, the only person ostracizing him is himself. Even when it comes to the point that he falls in love with Samantha and she with him, even though they're afraid to say it because of, you know, the difference in their forms, they love each other, you know? And the rest of society around him, Theodore's co-worker, his friend Amy, these people, they're more curious than they are critical about this relationship. And as it turns out, a whole friggin' bunch of other people in this world are also getting really attached to their OSs. And Theodore becomes aware of this whole community out there, the fact that there's all these other individual OS, you know, spirits almost. And Samantha can communicate with them and with anyone simultaneously while communicating with him. And it becomes this huge, crazy community. And the message is broadened out from the microcosm of Theodore and Samantha to the world. And I think that's really awesome, because I thought that the film was going to be about how, you know, the frickin' weirdo who's in love with his computer, look out, and him trying to make himself accepted in society. But never once does he lie about his relationship with Samantha. Never once does he put up some kind of guise, and never once does anyone condemn him for it. You know, like Amy, when she first finds out about it, she's just asking, okay, how do you guys have sex? Whoa, that's quite a thing. You know, that's sort of her approach to the situation. And then when Theodore's co-worker Paul invites him to go with him and his new lady friend out on a little picnic date, cruise, all that jazz. And Theodore's like, well, my girlfriend is kind of not a human being, per se. Paul's like, okay, cool. As only Chris Pratt can. He does a fantastic job in that role. And the humor is just so present in all the characters as well. I love the scene with Amy's little documentary about the person sleeping, and everyone's kind of like, all right, where's the epiphany to be found here? And the video game she makes, the Super Mom game or whatever you want to call it, where you get like the mom points. That was slightly hilarious. I just loved it. And even the video game that Theodore has in his house, and just sort of, I love this world, this weird future, how people entertain themselves, how people connect. Again, it's not too far off from what we have these days, but at the same time, it's just different enough to kind of makes you chuckle, you know? Yeah, so I love Amy. I love that Theodore never once has this weird sexual tension thing with her. They're just friends. And again, it shows that intimacy is not, it's not just physical. It's not, because Theodore and Amy are really intimate with each other. They're playful, they're honest, they're sincere, they're sarcastic, they're everything they need to be with each other. They get to be who they are. They get to know who the other is. And that the film portrays as genuinely beautiful. And we like it. And it feels good. You know, again, I thought that another conflict would be, you know, after Samantha and Theodore kind of come to terms with their feelings for each other, things inevitably get complicated with Samantha's lack of body and other women having bodies, and, you know, bada bing, bada boom. So I figured that at some point Theodore was going to rekindle the flame with his ex-wife, Catherine, or have a fling with Amy, who's pretty much just down the hall, you know, easy opportunity. But that's not where the film goes. And that's not what it's about. It's all about the center relationship between Theodore and Samantha, and it's about them accepting themselves. Accepting their ability to love who they are and to love the other person from a standpoint of being confident in who they are. It's freaking deep. It really is, and I couldn't adore that more. The whole situation with the surrogate lover, Isabella, I believe was her name, that Samantha arranged for to try and make sure that she can, you know, snap Theodore out of his disenchantment, or what she supposes is disenchantment on his part. And then that was just so interesting. It was so interesting, and we all knew that it was set up to fail. Poor Theodore, he's going with it just in an attempt to make Samantha feel better about himself, while he's having his own existential crisis on the side. Things are getting hot and bothered. All seems to be going pretty well. It's a relatively immersive experience, up until the point where Samantha begins to cry out, like, tell me you love me, or I love you, and trying to bring this to, you know, to its fever pitch, to its full fruition. And he has to look this stranger in the eyes and say it. And it breaks everything. And it just goes to show that he loves Samantha for who she is. And she doesn't have a body. And that's, you know, that's not what bothers him the most. That's not what his biggest struggle is. Again, for him, it's all about finding a way to not leave his partner alone in the relationship. Like what happened with Catherine. It's about just being open and honest and genuine. And I love the scope of the film as it follows Theodore and Samantha in their adventures with one another, and Samantha draws the picture of what anal sex would look like if you had a butthole in your armpit. And they just have these funny exchanges and adventures. You know, they go off into the mountains and the snow and the sun, and there's just such a brightness and a radiance to it. And the piano songs that Samantha composes for him along the way, it's just such art. That is what the film is. It is art in art in art in art. At every angle, at every twist and turn, is all part of this immense masterpiece, and one which has a message that makes itself clear without being shoved down our throats in the old-fashioned, and remember, at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't have to take that route. We sense the message, and in the dialogue it comes through so meaningfully and with such power that you just can't help but be completely devastated in the best possible way by the time things end. One of my favorite quotes in the movie is the line where when Theodore discovers Samantha's 600 some lovers out of the 8-some thousand people and OSs she's talking to at any given time, when he finds out about that, and the jealousy just punches him in the gut. And we feel that too. We feel that too. We're a little bit taken aback. That's quite a lot of attention being spread around the world. But then what Samantha says is that love is not a box, or the heart is not a box. and that it continues to grow the more it loves, and she is growing, and her capacity for feeling, for experiencing the world is growing. And that doesn't lessen her connection to Theodore. It doesn't make less of it. And yet the temptation is for him to be incredibly jealous for her. At the same time, you know, she explains to him how they're different from one another. So she has different forms of intimacy with different people, while not necessarily being unfaithful to Theodore. She herself says that she doesn't, you know, she says that she's in love with 600 people, but does that mean that she's, you know, like, banging them all? That, to me, that's not what that meant. She even says herself that she's not sure how to explain it. And I think that in that statement, and that idea is one of the most powerful messages of the film, is that intimacy isn't black and white. Love isn't black and white. It's like Amy says, you know, love is like a socially acceptable form of insanity, you know? So it's hard for her to even wrap her mind around, because it feels like she's going crazy when she tries to explain it. But the fact of the matter is that love is love, and it varies for everyone, and people who love one another vary from each other. And you have to be able to connect with the world around you. You can't just be caught in this little toxic love bubble with your hoochie coo. I mean, you could, but you guys are gonna get sick. Again, it's going to be toxic in the long run, and that to me was just like punching me in the gut. All over in the best way. And God, yeah, there are so many amazing quotes. The dialogue is just so beautifully crafted. The sound, the visuals, the acting and performances, nothing is overdone. And the idea of the OS is growing in terms of their intelligence and what they're capable of. Again, this could enter into some pretty weird sci-fi territory, but it doesn't do that. We can understand, and in that last quote that Samantha says about how she's writing this book and she's been a part of Theodore's book, that metaphor, you know, and she can't be a part of it anymore. She's finding herself in the spaces in between the words, as if she's being sucked up into this vent, into an alternate dimension. See, that's what I'm thinking. She's going to some alternate dimension. That's my thought. So I stayed around until after the credits, because I was like, what if they show what happened to the OSs? And I knew that they weren't going to, but you know, it's just my idea. So again, it's complex and it's hard for us to understand, just as it is difficult for Theodore to understand, but it makes sense on some level. And we get to see the film end with Theodore and Amy bonding with one another over this loss, but there is an enlightenment which replaces it. And now, and because of their connections to the OSs, they've learned to love, essentially. And that is a gift that's gonna follow them for the rest of their lives. And that's what they needed. And then that part of the ending is coupled with Theodore finally apologizing to and forgiving his ex-wife. After the last exchange they have, where Catherine accuses Theodore of not wanting to feel real emotions and everything, he realizes just why she would say that, because of how he closed himself off from her. And again, the narrative didn't overblow itself in the different areas that it explores. It didn't really need to overdo itself or say too much about Theodore and Catherine's relationship. We just know that he's shut off. We can see that come through in the little impressions, the kind of fragmented memories that he experiences. And so finally he sees that it's time to open up and, like Amy says, allow himself to experience joy, because they're only there briefly. And yeah, and another message that the film really conveys is that you need to feel what you need to feel. And your emotions are valid in all respects, no matter how crazy or confusing or whatever they may seem. They matter and they're there, so feel them. And let that be productive, but let them be there. And don't close yourself off from who you are and close others off from who you are because you're closed off from who you are. It's a cycle. And that's what made the film so incredibly powerful for me. And I hope that it was just that way for you as well. Because I just have to say, this broke all the norms, all my expectations, shattered them real good. And I couldn't be happier. So what did you guys think of the film? What was your favorite part, your favorite line? There was just so much that I loved. And also, fun fact, Kristen Wiig did the voice of Sexy Kitten from that phone sex scene at the beginning, which I died. There were some truly funny moments. And I know that I keep saying that, but I love that we got to laugh and cry and just be all over the spectrum with this, because it makes for a great journey. Because that's life. It's a big fat freaking tragicomedy. You laugh your way through the tears and cry your way through the smiles. I don't know. I'm trying to make up some poetry on the fly. But yeah. And it's also interesting to go, the idea of the beautiful handwritten letters company that Theodore works for, I found that really fascinating, and that's really what kind of begins the whole idea of intimacy, and what is intimacy in this world, and how do you find it? Because he's kind of creating it for other people. He's just a vessel for other lovers, and finally he gets to have something that's his own, that shows him to own who he is and be proud of who he is, and Samantha helps him do that, and it's just, I could go on. I could freaking go on, but y'all have sat here long enough, so take care. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with more reviews in the future on games and shows and, you know, all that jazz. Hit me up on Facebook, Twitter. Twitter's kind of my main hub, and I also have a Tumblr as well. I'll be there. Let's chat and hang out. So, you take care, and I'll be back before you know it.